What if your job was to represent the United States anywhere on Earth? One year, you're issuing visas in Mexico. The next, you're negotiating policy in Eastern Europe or evacuating Americans from a collapsing country. This is the life of a U.S. Foreign Service officer, America's diplomats on the front lines of global politics. But getting the job might be one of the most competitive hiring processes in the United States government. I'd like to share with you my experience with the Foreign Service candidate process. Before you even apply, you have to choose your track, your diplomatic specialty. There are 5. Political, which is analyzing foreign governments and the politics of the host nation. Economic, which involves trade, finance, and sanctions. Consular, dealing with the visas, Americans abroad, issues, lines, and legal paperwork. Management, which is running the embassy and making sure the supplies are well stocked. And then there is public diplomacy, managing the media, messaging, and the influence of the United States and its image abroad. But here's the catch. You don't just do one thing. Most officers rotate between roles and countries every few years. Step 1 is decisively simple. You apply and sign up for the Foreign Service Officer Test, the FSOT. This is the computer-based exam you take at a local testing center. And it's not just trivia. It tests U.S. government, world history, economics, writing, situational judgment, and culture in America. Most of it multiple choice, but there's also a timed essay at the end. And here's the reality. This is your first major filter only. The test alone doesn't get you through. If your score is satisfactory, you will then get invited to submit personal narratives and answer the qualifications evaluation panel questions. The personal narratives are short essays about your life. This is where you prove you have leadership, communication, judgment, and cross-cultural skills. Then comes the quiet but brutal stage, the qualifications evaluation panel. Real Foreign Service officers review your file, and most candidates get cut here. No explanation, no feedback. Then, if you pass this next stage, the step after submitting your PNQs and QEPs, you get an invite to take the Foreign Service Oral Assessment, the in-person exam. It is usually in Washington, D.C., or another temporary site owned by the State Department. I booked my flight to D.C. right after law school exams. Got a hotel, scoped the place out. This is the day that makes or breaks most candidates. Once you arrive at the testing center near the Washington Mall, you check in and go through a series of exams with other candidates. They each have similar exams. It has 3 parts. Now, the first part, it usually is the group exercise since all the candidates have just arrived. In this exercise, you're placed in a mock embassy team with the other candidates. There are assessors in the background watching all of you. You read your file, then debate how to allocate limited resources. And again, all of this is timed. But here's the twist. You're not competing by dominating. You're being judged on teamwork, persuasion, listening. Then, once this section is done, you move on to the case management system or the structured interview. For my part, I had the case management exercise. After you leave the group exercise room, you wait a little, then each of you are ushered into separate rooms. You're given a stack of embassy memos if you have the case management section. You have to prioritize, analyze, and write recommendations under timed conditions. It is as if you are already on the job. You analyze the paperwork that you receive and type up a memo into a computer at the testing center and give your recommendations. Then you move. The next piece is the structured interview. This part is closest to an actual job interview. They test your past behavior, your judgment, your motivation, and they already know your file. The catch is that you're being graded. Then, once you are done with that portion of the exercise, you and all the other candidates start to trickle back after long hours of exams and interviews to the main office lobby. The waiting begins. One by one, they call individuals' names. Some get up and disappear. Then more waiting. Finally, it is you and the final few who are left. Then, as the evening drags on, a Foreign Service officer or assessor comes in. No individual names are called. They ask you all to come with them to a new room. They bring you all in, and while you all wait around standing, the assessor smiles and hands each of you an envelope with your name. The famous envelopes you read about on blogs and chat boards as you prepare for this big day. The assessors congratulate you all on your conditional job offer. You open up your file and find your name, your score, and the conditional job offer from the U.S. State Department. However, even if you pass, you don't get the job. You get a conditional offer. You leave the testing center and head on home. Now comes the real scrutiny. In the following weeks from the oral assessment, you have to schedule your top security clearance, which is an interview with an investigator contracted by the Foreign Service. Then you do your medical clearance from a medical provider to say that you're medically fit to serve abroad. And then you submit all these paperwork for a final suitability review. The investigators then may even talk to your boss, your friends, your neighbors. Everything is on the table. If you clear everything, you're placed on the register, a ranked list of candidates. And here's the brutal truth. You can sit there for months or never get called, but there's a way to boost your chances: language testing. If you pass a State Department language exam, you get bonus points that push you higher on the list. Then, one day, you get the email. You've been selected. You're invited to join the next class. This is the moment every candidate waits for. You report to Washington, D.C., and begin A100, the Foreign Service Orientation course. This is where you learn how embassies work, how diplomacy is practiced, and how to operate as a U.S. diplomat. Then comes specialized training, and possibly months of language school. Then comes one of the most famous moments in the Foreign Service. You find out your first assignment. It could be Tokyo, Nairobi, Baghdad. You don't choose. The service does. Then you fly out. You walk into your embassy, and suddenly, you're no longer a candidate. You're a diplomat, representing the United States on the other side of the world. Foreign Service officers often describe the job the same way: unpredictable, demanding, sometimes dangerous, but also one of the few careers where your decisions can shape events on a global scale. So when you see an American embassy overseas, remember, everyone inside went through one of the hardest hiring processes in government just to earn a chance to represent a country.